I signed the divorce papers on a Tuesday morning in my lawyer's office in Enugu, and I thought that was the worst thing that would happen to me that day. I was wrong, because 2 hours later, my lawyer called me back into that same office, closed the door, and slid a photocopy of my marriage certificate across the table. Then she said the words that broke my life into 2 clean halves. Amara, look at the signature line. Look at it carefully. I looked. My signature was there. Mine, dated 9 years ago. But the space beside it, the space where my husband's name should have been, was empty. Ikenna had never signed our marriage certificate. For 9 years, I had been married to a man who, on paper, had never married me. And when I tell you why he did it, when I tell you what that empty line was hiding, you will understand why I am still shaking as I tell this story. If you love stories like this, stories about the secrets people bury inside ordinary lives, do yourself a favor and subscribe, because this one goes deeper than you can imagine. Now, let me start from the beginning. My name is Amara. I met Ikenna Obi when I was 26 years old, working as a front desk officer at a hotel in Independence Layout, Enugu. He walked in one rainy evening in a grey suit, water dripping from his shoulders, and asked me if the restaurant was still open. It was not, but he stood there talking to me for 40 minutes anyway, and by the time he left, he had my number, and I had this warm, dangerous feeling in my chest that I mistook for destiny. Ikenna was everything the women in my family prayed for on my behalf. He was 34, an engineer with a construction firm, softly spoken, generous without announcing it. When my younger brother needed school fees, Ikenna paid before I even finished explaining. When my mother was admitted at Park Lane Hospital, he was there before me, already talking to the doctors. My mother held my hand one evening and said, "Amara, this one is a husband. Do not let him pass you by." I did not let him pass me by. Within a year, he had done the introduction in my village in Suka. Within 18 months, we had done a small traditional rite. Nothing elaborate because Ikenna said his own family situation was complicated and he preferred things quiet. I remember that phrase, complicated. He said his father was late, his mother was difficult, his siblings were scattered abroad and full of wahala. I accepted it. When you are in love, you accept things you should question. You call it understanding. You call it maturity. You do not know yet that you are being trained to look away. Then came the courthouse wedding. That is the part I want you to pay attention to, because everything that destroyed me later was already present in that room and I did not see it. It was a Thursday. Ikenna chose the date. He said Thursdays were quieter at the registry, less crowd, less stress. I wore a simple white dress with lace sleeves. My friend Chioma came as my witness. On his side, there was one man I had never met before, a stocky man Ikenna introduced as his colleague, Mr. Odinaka. The ceremony itself was fast. The registrar read the words, we exchanged rings, people clapped, somebody snapped photos on a small camera. Then came the signing. I signed first. I remember the pen, a blue biro tied to the desk with a dirty string. I signed my name slowly, carefully, because I wanted it to be beautiful. Then I stepped back for Ikenna to sign, and at that exact moment, Chioma pulled me aside for photographs by the window because the light was good there. I posed, I laughed, I threw my bouquet in the air and caught it. And behind me, at the desk, my husband stood over the certificate with a pen in his hand. I never actually watched him sign. Do you understand what I am telling you? I assumed. The registrar stamped something, papers were gathered, Mr. Odinaka collected the documents and said he would handle the filing since he, quote, knew people at the registry and could make it fast. Ikenna thanked him. I thanked him. We went to Polo Park afterwards and ate rice and took more pictures, and I entered that marriage like you enter a house you believe has a foundation without ever once checking the ground. For 9 years, I was Mrs. Obi. I want you to understand how completely I was Mrs. Obi. I introduced myself that way at Kamsi's school gate every morning. Kamsi, our daughter, born 2 years into the marriage, with her father's eyes and my stubborn chin, I failed Mrs. Obi on hospital forms, on bank documents, on the church harvest committee list. When Ikena's firm held their end-of-year party, I stood beside him in matching Ankara and shook hands as Mrs. Obi. The name was my skin. I did not wear it. I lived inside it. And the marriage itself. For the first 4 years, I would have told you it was good. Ikena traveled a lot for site projects, Aba Kaliki, Owerri, sometimes Abuja for weeks. But he called every night, he sent money without being asked, he came home with gifts and tiredness and stories about difficult contractors. If he was sometimes distant, if his phone sometimes faced downward on the table, if he sometimes took calls on the balcony with his voice dropped low, I filed it all under the same folder where I had filed his complicated family. I looked away. I had been trained well. The first affair I discovered was in year 5. A receipt in his jacket for a hotel in Owerri. 2 guests, on a weekend he told me he was sleeping in a site container. I confronted him. He denied, then softened, then confessed, then wept. Actually wept, kneeling on our bedroom floor, holding my wrapper like a drowning man. He said it was one mistake, loneliness on the road, that it meant nothing. His mother, Mama Nkechi, came all the way from their hometown to beg me. She held my hands and called me the pillar of her son's life. I stayed. For Kamsi, I told myself, for the home we had built. The second affair in year 7, and this time there was no weeping. This time, when I showed him the messages I had seen, he looked at me with a flat, tired face and said, "Amara, what do you want me to say?" That was the day something in me packed its bags quietly and stood by the door of my own heart, waiting. The third affair, the one that ended everything, I did not discover through a receipt or a message. I discovered it through a knock on my gate on a Sunday afternoon in March. And the person standing at that gate was not just another woman. But I am getting ahead of myself. Hold that knock in your mind. We will come back to it, and when we do, you will understand why nothing in this story is what it seems. The woman at my gate that Sunday was young, maybe 28. She wore a green dress and held her phone against her chest like a shield. She asked, "Please, is this the Obi residence?" I said yes. She asked, "Are you his sister?" And I laughed, the way you laugh 1 second before your life changes, and said, "No, I am his wife." The woman's face did something complicated. Not shock, worse than shock, pity. She looked at me with pity, and then she said very quietly, "Madam, I think we need to talk." Her name was Somto. She sat in my parlor, on my cushions, under my wedding photo, and told me she had been seeing Ikena for a year and 1 month, that he had furnished a flat for her in Transekulu, that she was at the moment 3 months pregnant. I sat there and listened to all of it with a strange calmness, like a woman watching her own house burn from across the road. But it was the last thing she said that stayed with me long after she left. She said, "Madam, I am sorry. He told me his marriage was not a real marriage. I thought he meant you were separated. I did not know he meant it like something else." Not a real marriage. I turned that phrase over for days. I decided it was just the usual lie married men tell, small girls. My marriage is dead, my wife doesn't understand me, the usual anthem. I did not know, could not have known, that Ikena had told Somto the only complete truth he had told anyone in 9 years. When he came back from his trip that Thursday, I did not shout. I was past shouting. I put his food in front of him, sat opposite him, and said, "Somto came here, she is pregnant. I want a divorce." He stopped chewing. And here is the first thing that should have warned me, the first crack in the wall. He did not deny anything. He did not beg. Ikena, who kneeled on this same floor 5 years earlier and soaked my wrapper with tears, simply put down his fork, looked at me for a long time and said, "Amara, what do you want me to say?"
Amara, don't do anything through lawyers. Whatever you want, I will give you. Just don't involve lawyers. I thought it was shame. I thought he did not want his name in court documents. His colleagues whispering. So when he repeated it the next morning, and again that weekend, each time with this tight, urgent look, I actually felt a small bitter satisfaction. Good, I thought. Let him be afraid of something for once. I hired barrister Ngozi Ede the following Monday. Chioma recommended her. A small, sharp woman in her 50s with reading glasses and a voice like a closed door. She listened to my whole story, took notes, and said, "First things first, bring me your marriage certificate. Everything starts from there." I went home and searched, and this is where things became strange, in a way I could no longer explain away. The certificate was not in the file where we kept documents. Our land papers were there. Forgive me, our house papers, Kamsi's birth certificate, my own credentials, Ikena's engineering license. But the marriage certificate, the original, was gone. When I asked Ikena, he stood too quickly. "It's in the bank. Safe deposit. I'll bring it." He did not bring it. 3 times I asked. 3 times. Tomorrow. The 4th time I asked, he lost his temper in a way I had never seen, slamming his hand on the wardrobe and shouting, "Why are you disturbing me over paper? Is it paper you married? Is it paper you married?" Remember that sentence. Barrister Ngozi did not wait for Ikena's tomorrow. She sent a clerk to the marriage registry to obtain a certified true copy directly from the records. Routine, she called it. 2 weeks later, on that Tuesday morning, I sat in her office and signed my divorce petition with the same careful, beautiful signature I had used 9 years before. I felt heavy but clean, like a woman who has finally swept a room she avoided for years. I went and ate lunch alone at a restaurant and even smiled at the waiter. Then Ngozi called. "Amara, come back to the office. Now, please." The photocopy she slid across her table was slightly crooked, the way registry photocopies are. There was the crest, there was the registrar's stamp, faded purple. There was my name, Amara, written in my own hopeful hand. And beside it, where Ikena Obi should have been, nothing. A blank line. 9 years of blank line. I said the stupid thing first. I said, "They photocopied it before he signed." Ngozi shook her head slowly. "This is the certified copy of what is in their records. What is in their records is what legally exists. Amara, there is no completed marriage certificate for you in that registry. There is a half-executed document, which means, in the eyes of the law, there is a very serious question as to whether you have ever been married to this man at all." I want to describe to you what that moment felt like, but there are no words in English or Igbo for it. The closest I can come is this. You know when you are climbing a staircase in the dark and you reach for a step that is not there? That falling feeling, that half second where your whole body understands before your mind does. It was that, except the staircase was 9 years long and I had been standing on the missing step the entire time with my daughter in my arms. I asked the only question that mattered. Was it a mistake? People forget to sign things. Ngozi took off her glasses. That is what I intended to find out before calling you. So I made 2 phone calls. The first was to the registry to ask how a ceremony could be conducted, stamped and filed with only 1 signature. The second was to your husband's counsel, because as of this morning, your husband has counsel. And Amara, this is the part you need to sit down for. His lawyer did not sound surprised. His lawyer said, and I am quoting him, "Ah, so she has finally seen it. That certificate complicates things. Of my client is prepared to be reasonable." Finally seen it, prepared to be reasonable. Those are not the words of a man who forgot to sign a paper in the excitement of his wedding day. Those are the words of a man who had been waiting 9 years for this exact conversation. Ikena knew. He had always known. And he had not called me. Not that day, not that night. My phone stayed silent, and somehow that silence was louder than any confession. That night I sat on my bed with the photocopy in my hand, and I forced myself to go back to that Thursday at the registry. The quiet date he chose, the witness I had never met, Mr. Odinaka, who knew people and handled the filing. Chiuma pulling me to the window for photos at the exact moment of his signing. The original certificate that lived in my house for years, and then quietly vanished into a bank vault I had never seen. Don't involve lawyers. Is it paper you married? It was not a mistake. It was a design. And if it was a design, then there was a reason. Something that empty line was protecting. Something worth 9 years of pretending. By the way, if you are enjoying this story, this is a good moment to subscribe, because what I found when I went looking for that reason is the part of this story I still cannot tell without my hands going cold. The first thread I pulled was Mr. Odinaka, the mystery witness, the colleague who handled the filing. In 9 years, I had seen that man exactly twice. Once at the wedding, once years later at a burial, where he greeted Ikenna with his strange stiffness, the way you greet someone who owes you money, and left early. Ikenna's firm was not large. I had met his real colleagues at parties, at Kamsi's christening. None of them was Odinaka. So I did something I'm not proud of, but I would do again. I took Ikenna's old phone, the one he had abandoned in a drawer when he upgraded, charged it in secret, and went through it. Odinaka was saved there, not as Odinaka colleague or Odinaka work. He was saved as Odinaka registry. Registry. The man was not Ikenna's colleague at all. He was a staff of the marriage registry itself. The stocky stranger who witnessed my wedding, who gathered my documents with helpful hands, who knew people and could make the filing fast, was one of the people. Ikenna had brought his own registry insider to his own wedding. You don't do that by accident. You do that when you need the paperwork to go a very specific kind of wrong. The old phone gave me one more gift, a message thread from 8 years ago, mostly deleted, but one message survived, from Odinaka to Ikenna. It read, "Oga, everything is as we discussed. The file is quiet, but make sure Madam never comes to request anything herself. If she comes in person, I cannot control what she sees. The file is quiet." 8 years, that message was sitting in a drawer in my own bedroom, telling me my marriage was a stage play, and I had been sleeping beside it. I took everything to Barrister Ngozi. She read the message twice, and then she said something that redirected the entire search. She said, "Amara, this tells us how. It does not tell us why. A man does not bribe a registry official to sabotage his own wedding for fun. There are only a few reasons a man would want a marriage that looks real to everyone but is legally hollow. And almost all of them come down to one thing: he was protecting a prior claim." I asked her what she meant. She said, "I mean, before we go any further, we need to find out whether you were his first wife or just your loudest one." I laughed. I actually laughed in her office because it was impossible. Ikenna had no past wife. Ikenna's family was complicated, yes. Quiet, yes, but I had met his mother 100 times. Mama Nkechi, who begged me to stay after the first affair, who called me the pillar of his son's life, who sent me stockfish and ogbono every Christmas, who held Kamsi at her naming ceremony and wept with joy. If there had been another wife, a first wife, a hidden wife, his own mother would have... And then I stopped laughing because I remembered something small from 6 years ago, that I had filed away in that same folder where I filed everything about Ikenna that did not make sense. Mama Nkechi had come to visit us. One evening, she and Ikenna spoke in the backyard in low voices, and the low voices became a low argument. And through the kitchen window, I heard her say one sentence in Igbo before Ikenna hushed her. She said, "Ihe omere no adaha, go call you to account one day." At the time, I assumed Ada meant his sister, some family quarrel abroad. Ikenna told me it was about land in the village, family land, and I shouldn't worry about village matters. I did not worry. I had been trained. But standing in Ngozi's office, that sentence returned with a different face. What you did to that Ada? What if Ada was not his sister? Ngozi hired a private investigator, a quiet, retired police officer named Mr. Felix, who charged too much and was worth all of it. She also filed for something called discovery in the divorce case, forcing Ikenna's side to produce financial and personal records. And this is where Ikenna's behavior changed in a way that frightened me. The man who had said, "Whatever you want, I will give you," suddenly wanted to settle everything overnight. His lawyer sent an offer. The house transferred to me fully, a lump sum that made even Ngozi raise her eyebrows, generous support for Kamsi, one condition: I withdraw the petition, sign a private settlement, and agree in writing never to make any claim or inquiry regarding the status of the marriage. Never inquire. He was not paying me to leave. He was paying me not to look. Ngozi put the offer down and said, in 30 years of practice, when a man offers you the whole house not to open a cupboard, it is because the cupboard is worse than the house. We rejected the offer. That night, for the first time in months, Ikenna called me. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, the voice from the hotel lobby 15 years ago. He said, "Amara, take the money. I am begging you. Not for me.
If you keep digging, what you will find will not just wound you, it will wound Kamsi. Some doors, once you open them, you cannot close again. Please. And then he said the thing that kept me awake until morning. He said, you think I am the villain of this story. I accepted that a long time ago. But I was also protecting you. From the day at the registry, I was protecting you. Protecting me? By not marrying me? Make it make sense. I told him I would see him in court, and I ended the call. If you are still here, still listening, take 1 second and subscribe. Because everything you have heard so far was the surface. What Mr. Felix found in Ekena's village 2 weeks later is where this story truly begins. Mr. Felix traveled to Ekena's hometown, Nelka. He drank palm wine with old men, he attended a Sunday service, he asked slow, harmless questions, and he came back with a photograph. It was old, printed, faded at the corners, the kind of photo that lives in family albums. It showed a traditional wedding. A canopy, plastic chairs, a young woman kneeling with a cup of palm wine, searching a crowd for her husband. The young man she was walking toward, laughing in a red cap and isiago, was unmistakably Ekena. Younger, slimmer, but Ekena. Mr. Felix said, this was taken 19 years ago, 10 years before your own wedding. The whole village remembers it, full traditional rites, bride price paid and received. In the eyes of custom and of native law, Sa was married, and Madame, he paused. Madame, there is no record, none, of that bride price ever being returned or that marriage ever being dissolved. Which means on Thursday you stood in that registry in your white dress, Ekena Obi already had a wife, a first wife, a legal wife. If he had signed your certificate that day, he would not have been completing a marriage. He would have been committing a crime, bigamy, treason. That empty line was not him failing to marry you, madam. It was him covering his own back while taking your whole life. I looked at the kneeling woman in the photograph. Something about her face pulled at me, some familiarity I could not place, like a song heard through a wall. I asked the question I already feared. Who is she? Where is she now? And Mr. Felix looked at me with the same pity Somto had won at my gate and said, that is the part we need to talk about, because you have met her. Madam, you know this woman. Mr. Felix laid a second photograph beside the first. This one was recent. A woman in her early 50s in a neat blue suit standing at a podium at a school event, smiling at a hall of children in green and white uniforms. And my whole body went cold. Because I knew that hall. I had sat in that hall for 6 years of prize-giving days and Christmas carols. The woman in the photograph was Mrs. Adaize Okwoso, the proprietress of Kamsi's school. Let me say that again so you feel what I felt. My husband's first wife, his real wife, the woman whose existence had hollowed out my entire marriage, had been running my daughter's school. She had shaken my hand at the gate. She had pinned a prize ribbon on Kamsi's chest in primary 3 and held her shoulder while I took photos. She had looked into my face at least 50 times over 6 years, knowing exactly who I was and exactly what I was not, and she had never said one word. And it was Ekena who chose that school. I remembered it clearly. I had wanted the school near the roundabout. Ekena insisted on this one. Better standards, he said. He drove Kamsi there himself the first week. He had placed our daughter every single day into the hands of the woman he was hiding from me. Why? What kind of man does that? What kind of woman allows it? I did not tell Ngozi I was going. I did not tell Chioma. On a Thursday, apparently, Thursdays are the days my life happens, I drove to that school at closing time, walked past the flag and the whistling gate man, and knocked on the proprietress's office door. When Adaize looked up and saw me, she did not look surprised. She looked like a woman who had been expecting a knock for 6 years. She told her secretary to hold her calls. She locked the door. Then she sat down opposite me, folded her hands, and said, "You found the photograph. I told him you would one day. Sit down, Amara. Not Madam. Not Mrs. Obi. Amara, because between the two of us at least, there should finally be truth." And then she told me a story that broke my anger into pieces and rearranged every piece. She said, I was never Ekena's love. I was his burden. 20 years ago, I was married to his elder brother, Namdi. Namdi was the light of that family. When he died, suddenly, badly, I was 29 with a small son on my hip, and the family gathered in that compound and decided my future without me. You know our custom, or maybe you don't. In their village, in their family, a widow is not left to scatter. A brother takes her, keeps her within the family, keeps the child within the name. Mama Nkechi stood in that parlor and told Ekena, "You will take your brother's wife." It was not a request.
The traditional rites you saw in that photograph, the palm wine, the red cap, the kneeling, that was not a wedding of two people in love. That was a family closing a wound with rope. Ikenna was 24. He drank the wine because his mother's eyes were on him, and then he left for Enugu within the month. And in 20 years, Amara, he has never once been my husband in any way that matters. We have never lived together. But in the eyes of custom, and yes, in the eyes of the law that recognizes custom, I am his wife. The bride price his brother paid for me was never returned. Returning it would mean casting me and my son out of the family name. And Mama Nkechi has sworn on Namdi's grave that it will never happen while she breathes. I sat there with my hands pressed flat on her desk to stop them shaking, and I asked her the question that mattered most. Then why not tell me? 9 years, Adaize, you watched me. You watched my child grow. One sentence from you would have what? She said, and for the first time her calm cracked, and underneath it was something old and tired and burnt. I sent you a message once, not with my name, years ago. A wedding gift with no card delivered to your house. A carved wooden staircase, small, an ornament with one step missing. I thought if she's paying attention, she will ask questions. You put it on your shelf and called it abstract art. And God forgive me, it was true. The little staircase, it was still in my parlor. I had dusted a warning every Saturday for years. After that, Adaize continued, I made a decision that you are free to hate me for. I decided that your ignorance was kinder than my truth. You were happy, your daughter was thriving, and I asked Ikenna for one thing only in all these years. I asked to be close to the child, not to harm her, never that. But you must understand, my own son grew up with a father who was a photograph and an uncle who paid fees from a distance and never came. When Ikenna needed a school for Kamsi, I told him, bring her to me. Let me at least watch one child of this family grow up in front of my eyes.
It was the only payment I ever took from him. Hate me if you want, but everything I could not have, I guarded for your daughter every single day. I want to tell you that I shouted at her, that I called her a liar, a witch, an enemy. But I sat in that office and I looked at this woman, and all I could see was a 29-year-old widow standing in a parlor while other people decided her life, and a 26-year-old receptionist standing in a hotel lobby while a man in a grey suit decided hers. 2 women, 20 years apart, tied to the same man by ropes that other people had knotted. When I finally spoke, my voice did not belong to me. I asked, the registry? The empty signature line? Did you know? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, not at first. I found out 3 years after your wedding. And Amara, this is the part you came here for, so listen well. It was not Ikenna's idea. I said, Odinaka? She shook her head slowly. Odinaka was the hand, he was not the head. Think, who knew about me? Who enforced the custom? Who has spent 20 years making sure the bride price is never returned, the marriage never dissolved, the family name never embarrassed? Who begged you on her knees to stay after the first affair because a divorce and a court and lawyers pulling documents was the one thing that could expose everything? And the floor of my world, which I thought had already finished collapsing, found one more level to fall to. Mama Nkechi, the stockfish at Christmas, the tears at Kamsi's naming, the pillar of my son's life, she had called me. My mother-in-law, who was never legally my mother-in-law, had engineered the whole thing. When Ikenna told her he wanted to marry me all those years ago, she had given him a choice that was not a choice. She would not permit a divorce from Adaize, would not permit the bride price returned, would not permit the family shame, but she also would not lose her son to rebellion. So she found the middle road, the crooked road. Let him have his white wedding, his ring, his Mrs. Obi. Let the girl believe. Odinaka was her late husband's kinsman, planted in the registry years before. All Ikenna had to do was choose a quiet Thursday, bring the right witness, and step up to that desk with a pen he would never press to paper. Your husband is a coward, Amara, Adaize said, and there was no cruelty in it, only exhaustion. He is not a monster, there is a difference, and after 20 years I have learned to measure it exactly. A monster would sleep well.
Ikenna has not slept well in 9 years. That is not a defense. It is just the truth. He wanted you enough to steal you, but not enough to defy his mother to keep you honestly. So he built you a beautiful house on a missing step and prayed you would never look down. I drove home that evening through Enugu traffic with my hand steady on the wheel and my whole life rearranging itself in the rearview mirror. Every memory reintroduced itself with its true face. His complicated family, the quiet Thursday, don't involve lawyers. Is it paper you married? I was protecting you. And the cruelest one of all, Mama Nkechi, kneeling in my parlor after the first affair, gripping my hands, begging me to stay. And me, foolish me, thinking she was fighting for my marriage when she was only guarding her secret. The woman was not begging a daughter, she was managing a risk. But here is what nobody in that family understood about me. They had spent 9 years studying how to deceive me and no time at all studying who I was. I am not a woman who burns houses. I am a woman who reads documents. And now, finally, I had all of them. Ngozi and I sat down and built our case like masons. The certified copy with the empty line. Odinaka's message, the file is quiet. The settlement offer demanding I never inquire. Mr. Felix's photographs and village testimony. And Adaize, who did something I will honor until I die. She agreed to swear an affidavit. Everything. The customary marriage, the family pressure, what she knew of the registry arrangement. When I asked her why, she said, because my son is 23 now, and he asked me last year why I never fought for anything. I did not have an answer. This is my answer. Legally, the ground under Ikenna was quicksand. There was no statutory marriage to divorce, true, but Ngozi is not a woman you leave openings for. What there was, she explained, was 9 years of fraud, deceit, a man who had induced me into a purported marriage he knew was void, taking 9 years of my life, my labor, my name changing, my joint accounts, on the strength of a ceremony he had deliberately sabotaged. There was a daughter whose legitimacy and inheritance had to be secured in writing, ironclad, forever. And hovering over all of it, one word that made his lawyer's voice change on the phone: conspiracy. Because the moment a registry official enters the story, it stops being a family shame and becomes a criminal matter, and it stops being only Ikenna's problem and becomes Odinaka's problem. And Odinaka, facing the end of his career and possibly a cell, would not sink alone. He would name the head, not just the hand. And the head was an old one in the village whose entire life was built on the family name never ever being dragged through a courtroom. Checkmate is a quiet word. It does not shout. It just closes doors one by one until there is only one left open and you watch your opponent walk through it. Within a month, Ikenna's side surrendered on every point. The house transferred to my name absolutely, no conditions. A trust for Kamsi's education through university, funded upfront, untouchable. Financial restitution that Ngozi calculated line by line like a butcher weighing meat. 9 years of my salary contributions, my sacrifices, my name. Full acknowledgement of Kamsi as her daughter, with her inheritance rights secured in a deed his own family elders were made to witness. And one thing more, the thing I demanded myself, that made his lawyer protest and Ngozi smile. A letter, written in Ikenna's own hand, signed, and this time I stood over him and watched the pen touch the paper. I watched every letter of his name, in which he admitted the truth of what was done at that registry. Not for court, for me. For the day Kamsi is old enough to ask what happened between her parents, so that no version of this family ever gets to tell my story for me. He wrote it at my dining table, the same table where I had served him 9 years of food. It took him almost 2 hours, and twice he stopped and put the pen down and pressed his palms against his eyes. I did not comfort him. I also did not enjoy it, and that surprised me. I had imagined this moment for months, imagined it tasting like victory. It tasted like ashes and rain. When he finished, he slid the pages across to me and said one thing. He said, the day at the registry, when Chioma called you for photographs, I stood there with the pen and I told myself, sign it. Just sign it and go to prison if it comes to that. Let them do their worst. I counted to 3, Amara. I swear to you, I counted to 3. And then Odinaka took the papers from under my hand. And I let him, and I have been letting him for 9 years. I looked at this man that I had loved with my full chest since I was 26 years old, and I finally understood the exact size of him. Adaize was right. Not a monster, a coward. And I tell you honestly, standing in the ruins, I think the coward destroys more homes than the monster. The monster at least lets you see the knife. You want to know how it all settled, so let me tell you plainly, because you have walked this whole road with me, and you deserve the truth without decoration. Ikenna did not go to prison. The evidence that could have buried him was the same evidence that would have dragged Kamsi's name through every newspaper in the state, and I chose my daughter's peace over my own vengeance. Odinaka was quietly retired from the registry when certain letters reached certain desks. Where he is now, I do not ask. Mama Nkechi, I have seen exactly once since everything came out. At Kamsi's confirmation, at the back of the church, in a white blouse, looking small in a way I had never seen her look before. She caught my eye across the pews and made a movement as if to rise, as if to come to me. I looked at her for a long moment, then I turned back to face the altar. Some doors, once you close them, you do not open again. She taught me that herself in her own way. Somto had her baby, a boy. Ikenna is doing for that child, I hear, what he should have done for all of us from the beginning. Telling the truth early, however ugly it is. Maybe people can only learn on the 3rd try. Maybe that is not my business anymore. It is not my business anymore. Adaize is still the proprietress of Kamsi's school. And yes, Kamsi is still there. And no, I did not remove her. And I know some of you listening will not understand that. But hear me. In the wreckage of everything false, that woman turned out to be one of the only true things. Last term at prize giving day, she pinned a ribbon on Kamsi's chest, and then she looked over my daughter's head at me, and I nodded, and she nodded, and there was a whole silent library in that nod. Her son, Namdi's son, is doing his master's degree now. She fought for something in the end, and it counted, and I was part of what it counted for. Life is strange like that. The woman I should hate most is the one who handed me back my truth. And me? Here is the bittersweet heart of it. The part I sat with for a long time before I could say it out loud. I got the house. I got justice, or the closest thing to it this world sells. I got my daughter's future locked in iron. But I also had to stand in a mirror and accept that I was never Mrs. Obi. 9 years of introducing myself at school gates and office parties, 9 years of signing that name, and the name was smoke. It was never mine because it was never given, only borrowed to keep me quiet. That grief is a specific grief.
Nobody died, and yet I mourned. I mourned a marriage that had never legally existed, which means I could not even properly divorce it. And let me tell you, there is no widow's wrapper for that kind of loss. You just wake up one morning and start answering your father's name again. So that is what I did. I am Amara Nwafo now. The name I was born with. The name that was true before any man rented me a false one. The first time I wrote it on a form again, my hand shook. The 10th time, it flowed. These days, when I stand at that school gate and a new mother asks me, "Are you Mrs. Somebody?" I smile and I say, "No, I am Amara. Just Amara. Fully, completely, legally Amara." And you would be amazed how solid the ground feels when every step on your staircase is actually there. I keep the small carved staircase on my shelf, the one with the missing step. Kamsi asked me about it once, why I keep a broken ornament in a corrected life. I told her, when you are older, I will tell you a story about it. And I will. I will tell her that the most dangerous lies are not the ones people tell you. They are the ones built into the floor under your feet. The ones you stand on every day and call your life. Check your documents. Check your foundations. Love with your whole heart, but also please guard your paperwork. Good night.